And they wore all the bright colors and all that.
Yeah.
And so the anti-war protesters were that way. And no, who made up the actual anti-war protests? What kind of people? There was a real cross-section of America. All kinds of people were involved in the anti-war protests. It weren't, and this was a way to discredit the anti-war protests. And I got to be very clear about it. The reason people say that today has nothing to do with the Vietnam War. It's to shut up people today who might be opposed to, let's say, bombing places or invading countries, which we are bombing 11 countries right now in the United States. We're in low-grade war all over the world. In your lifetime, we've gone to, well, when were you born? What year?
2003.
2003. So the U.S. had already got involved in Afghanistan. It wasn't quite an invasion. It was more of getting involved in the Civil War. And then when you were 1, or just born, the U.S. invaded Iraq. And it was a way to shut up people who complained about the invasion of Iraq, let's say, by saying, hey, you got to treat the soldiers better. You're bad-mouthing the soldiers. What is it? Not bad-mouthing the soldiers. You're bad-mouthing, not bad-mouthing. It's dissent against a political idea of going to war. And this is where we get to the stab in the back. And this is something, I think, right at the end of the class. And the stab in the back, the idea that there's somebody within the United States for traitors. And that's how come the United States lost the war. And this represents from what war?
World War I.
Yeah, that's World War I. And this is a very pernicious myth that started, it really had its beginning in Germany after World War I. And they blamed communists or Jews. These were all posters from the 1920s. And the idea was Jews were getting rich off the war, and then when they couldn't make any more money, they killed the German, stabbed in the back, and here's a communist stabbing you in the back. The roots of the fascist or the Nazi party would come out of this. We have traitors within. And that's what came out of the United States. In fact, I'm just finishing a book about the mid-1970s. And Ronald Reagan, who ran for president in 76, didn't get the nomination. But he made a couple, this became part of his speech, and he would become a 2-term president, that the Democrats and the anti-war movement were traitors and caused us to lose in Vietnam. And it was very politically effective. And by the way, that's insane. Who was the president of the United States? See if you know this. The president of the United States when the U.S. first committed full-scale ground forces to Vietnam. Most of you should know this. JFK sent advisors. You're really close.
LBJ.
Lyndon Johnson. And what party was Lyndon Johnson? He was a Democrat. And to say that Democrats were responsible for losing the war, that a Democratic president committed forces, that's insane. But that's how corrosive that idea of the stab in the back is. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've had people tell me that we lost in Vietnam because they wouldn't let us fight the war, and the anti-war movement, and the media. So many times. And it's like, wait, we sent nearly 600,000 troops. Twice as many bombs were dropped on North and South Vietnam than all the bombs dropped in World War II, all the explosives in World War II combined. And that wasn't enough? But they just remember this. So here's a couple cartoons. So here's this is an advertisement for a book. And it's literally called Stabbed in the Back. But why the United States lost in Vietnam? Here, it might be hard to see, but here's an anti-war protester. And it's saying, arise students, arise everybody, protest U.S. action in Vietnam. And Uncle Sam is worried about it, and look who's in the, where is he getting his information? Who's this? The Soviet Union, the communists. That's who's behind it. Same thing here. Protest Vietnam, burn your draft cards, student arise, demonstrate, march. Is it because students have a political reason to oppose the war? No. Outside agitators. The communists. And by the way, that's a really common way to get people to quit protesting. It's very common. There have been protests all summer. And one of the ways to discredit the protest for most commonly the Black Lives Matter movement was to say it was outside agitators or anarchists, which is hilarious, or other things. The reason why anarchist is hilarious is because anarchists, by definition, don't have an organization to do this kind of stuff. In fact, I heard someone say we're going to subpoena the anarchist records. They're anarchists! Okay, so moving on. But all you're doing is discrediting it. Because if people don't really think about it, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to look out for the anarchists. So, the best example of that would be, anybody know what that is? Academy Award-winning actress, Jane Fonda. And Jane Fonda was very vocal in the anti-war movement. And she went to North Vietnam in 1971. Now, the United States was never actually fighting North Vietnam, technically. The whole war was a civil war in South Vietnam. Just North Vietnam was sending troops. The United States were sending troops. The U.S. began to bomb North Vietnam to try to convince them to quit helping. It's complex. We'll get to it. She went there. Her goal was to bargain for the release of United States prisoners of war. And so she went there, and then, the North Vietnamese were smart. What are they going to do? She went there. She's very intelligent, but was very naive. And what do you think they're going to do? Propaganda. They would use her to make them look better. So they got her to pose on anti-aircraft guns. And immediately she became, to the pro-war people, the biggest traitor in America. Jane Fonda. In fact, she just won an Academy Award. And her goal there was to release prisoners and end the war. Now, she was foolish for doing this. I mean, she got set up. But the U.S. was never actually at war with North Vietnam. But this, you would not believe what a big deal this became. I remember, I've seen this, I just saw this. And this was on, I saw this on a car just a couple years ago. And this was a rally, this was actually a Tea Party rally in 2010. And look what they put on the outhouse. What year did that say she went to Vietnam? North Vietnam? 1971. And that was 2010. I saw this just a few years ago. I still see this kind of thing. She just wrote a book. She's now, gosh, she must be early 80s. And she just wrote a book. And there's, Hanoi J. Wow. That's how pernicious the stab in the back thing is. So, we're going to jump right to this last one, last myth. And this one sticks with it, and it's, I'm not going to lie, it's a source of constant irritation for me, especially every time I drive towards Townsend. So, there's a myth. Oh, first off, what letters mean? What's this mean? So, during the war, it's mostly pilots, but there were a number of POWs captured by the North. Now, they weren't at war, and the United States was not at war with North Vietnam, and yet the U.S. was bombing them. And so technically that's a war crime. North Vietnam treated the POWs, at least for the first couple of years, horrifically bad. And it's just unbelievably bad. Now, let's be clear. U.S. and its allies treated Viet Cong and North Vietnamese POWs horrifically bad. And so prisoners of war. And then there's going to be a lot of people gone, missing but killed in action. They can't find the bodies. I mean, if a plane shot down over North Vietnam, over the highlands, are you going to find the bodies? Or the plane blows up, you're going to find a body? And so there were about 1,500 missing in action. Or, I'm sorry, gone. Dead, killed in missing but killed in action. The Nixon administration in 1971, as a political stunt to do two things. First off, to discredit North Vietnam, but also to discredit the anti-war movement. Change the designation of killed but missing in action to just MIA. Missing in action. implying, and then they tied it to the prisoners of war, implying what about those 1,500 missing in action? They might be what? Alive and being kept prisoner by North Vietnam. They had absolutely no doubt, no evidence of it. It was a cynical political ploy, and I think an evil one, because the families of these people, I mean, they're dead, and it's awful. But it gave them false hope that they might be alive, and I think that is evil. That's a cynical, evil plot. I don't like Richard Nixon. I'll be very clear about that. As much as I have his picture, well, but what does it make the anti-war movement look like? You want to end the war while they're holding our prisoners? They made it appear like the war was about the fact that North Vietnam was hiding prisoners. Instead, no, the war was about us trying to prop up a dictatorship in South Vietnam. And so soon, people started wearing these copper bracelets. I can remember people wearing these, of the names of POWs and then MIAs who were dead. And a front group tied to Richard Nixon invented this flag as a cynical ploy to play on people's emotions and to make North Vietnam look bad in the peace negotiations. Soon, this is going to fly over the flag. I remember this button. I remember these bumper stickers. And yeah, it was pretty awful. Okay, after 68, they actually treated them not well, but as you would expect a POW to be treated, humanely but poorly. And this myth exists to this day. This flag is all over about the MIAs. There's a whole series of really bad movies, usually involving Sylvester Stallone. The Rambo movies where he goes to Vietnam. I mean, has anyone ever seen, was it Rambo, the second Rambo movie? Has anyone ever seen a Rambo movie? If you're bad, I'll make you watch one. If you continue to be mean to me. But even this was just 4 years ago. The state of Montana designated the road from Helena to Townsend as the POW-MIA Memorial Highway. You go that way, there's this sign. This is right near Walmart. All for this cynical political ploy. But that shows you how effective that myth has become. And it's not to take anything away from the horror of the prisoners who would be released in 73, which, by the way, as soon as the prisoners were released, it became a big moneymaker to make MIA. For MIA. By the way, people who sold the bracelets got rich. Yeah.
So how did they believe that there were still people there even after all the POWs were released? How did that make people believe?
Part of it is sad. They're just so desperate. And that I can understand. But also, it's just this, I think people don't think. What would be, it would imply that North Vietnam is keeping these people as leverage. They had no reason to keep these prisoners of war. In fact, North Vietnam would be shocked by this. All through the 80s, a billionaire named Ross Perot tried to make this big thing to North Vietnam that he would spend $500 million to release the POWs. And they're like, this is not the country of Vietnam. What are you talking about? And this goes on to the 1990s, and there's still people who believe it. They died in these camps. It's just simply not true. And it kind of makes me sick, but then it became a thing like, if you don't support something like this, are you against the POWs? You kind of get stuck. And then most people just don't know. Years go by, people forget. Richard Nixon, that's all I'm going to say. Richard Nixon. And so with that, let's go ahead then and get to the events, the roots of the war. And so I just want to go through the myths. I got a couple other things there, but Vietnam is filled with myths. And, President Trump, he still uses it for his campaign. This is so weird. You're not going to learn about uniform. President Trump got out of the war, or got out of the draft. And it's been kind of a thing because he doesn't want, he wouldn't be the only president. President Bush got out of it. President Clinton got out of it. And so, they got out of fighting in the Vietnam War, and it was a way to, it can become issues about that. Okay, we'll talk about that, how you get to the draft and that sort of thing. By the way, you may know how they got out of it? President Trump found a friendly doctor. You had to have a little money and power, who said he had bone spurs in his foot, so he couldn't go. So he wasn't drafted. I have a bone spur. President Clinton got a deferment for going to graduate school. President Bush, so the president when you were born, they pulled some strings and got him into the Air National Guard. If you're in the National Guard, you'd have to go. And there'd be a waiting list of thousands, and he got to the head of the line. Because if you have power and influence, you can get through. And while most people don't have power and influence, working people, they're the ones who went. So we'll talk more about that. So let's get to the roots of the war. I'm just going to review a couple things. I got some slides. A couple things. Let's see what we remember. You remember things? You don't remember anything, do you?
Nothing at all.
Huh?
Depends on the day. Which
On the
year is
day.
this again?
And by the way, it's so much harder. Last spring was a weird song. Did you notice that? And then this is weird. School just started. So let's talk about a couple things. First off, why does the United States fear the communists? Yes.
So, if I recall correctly, it kind of like McCarthyism, and they were a bit of a scapegoat during the 50s when we had the Red Scare. We wanted to say, oh, let's blame all of our problems on one group of people. And it became a way for the country to come together over alienating certain groups of people.
A pretty common thing, find someone to hate and we all hate them together.
Yeah.
The enemy of the enemy becomes my friend. And so even though I can't stand all you people, we can all hate them. I just pointed to Mr. Mihalish's room. Let's get them! So with that, you're on the right track. After World War II, there had been a fear of communism. There had been a rabid fear of socialism in the United States. And most people had no idea what socialism was. But the Americans coming out of the Great Depression. The Great Depression's over. Then World War II. And finally, a chance to benefit from the affluence of the United States. And the New Deal. What president did the New Deal?
FDR.
Yeah, Franklin Roosevelt. An unprecedented growth in income for regular working people. That would go on until 1980. Thankfully, we're out of that. Woo! But I have no idea. Yeah, it's the exact opposite now. Who's getting rich now? As we use as machines, but Google and Microsoft and things. What? See how much Jeff Bezos got since the pandemic began? Do we know how much money he has? He's number one. You know how much money he got since the pandemic began? $86 billion. That's more than I make in a year. That's wealth beyond our even remotest comprehension. But it wasn't like that right after World War II. Middle class, this is what we consider to be middle class, regular working people could afford to buy things. And what did they want? They wanted a house, a car, and what new big thing in the 50s? Yeah, a TV. I know there's more now, but isn't that kind of basically, like if you're on that little piece of land, before the Great Depression, it was on a farm. That died. Then it became on a house. I mean, if you don't have a house, you really don't have that sense of permanence. You have a little bit of sense of wealth. Aaron, you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah. Figured it out again.
And so they finally could buy these things. And to them, the communists represented somebody who's going to take it away. They're going to take it away. I suffered and sacrificed. I went through depression and war. Come out of the war, at least not Not everybody was included in this prosperity, but a significant number. And now I finally get a chance to have the so-called American dream, and they want to take away what I have and give it to whom?
People who don't work.
Yeah, people who don't deserve it. People who don't deserve what I have. Which, if you don't have much, that's kind of a scary thing, isn't it? Now, people are going to have more. That's also a very divisive thing, isn't it? What a great way to divide people. Don't vote for him because he's going to take away what you have. I'm going to take away what you have. But I'm going to be smile. Can't you see? I'm trying to glare, but I can't glare. It's hard to glare when you. That's all I got. I really am sad I didn't grow like a big mustache. Because it'd be so
Not
great to
too
open it
late.
up.
Yeah, it's still time.
There's still time? Yeah, I know. We might have a year of this. I just scared myself. All right, so here are the communists. But what's made the communists? And we're not going to talk about all the tenets of socialism. And their main goal was the fact that there would be no classes. The workers would control the means of production. The idea there would be no super rich, and wealth would be wealth of a country. Don't think it's just money. Would be spread out evenly amongst all people, and you get what you earn, etc. But now, the biggest socialist, communism is a form of socialism, or they are the biggest, a socialist country is the biggest country in the world. What country? Not now, I meant in 1945, after the war, before Vietnam. The Soviet Union, the biggest country in the world. We have the Soviet Union, the Not even close. Not even close. I try to bounce it off and get into Mr. Larson. It's a fine science. Okay, the Soviets. But here's the big thing about the Soviets. What did they just do in World War II? They're our ally, enemy of an enemy. But what did they do to Germany?
Beat them.
Yeah, they beat Germany. And we knew it. I mean, sure, U.S., British, Canadian, French forces contributed a lot, sacrificed a lot, but everybody knew that the German army, their back was broken by the Soviets. We all knew it. After the war, not only do we have this philosophy that many people were scared of, but they are an awesome military power. And they're scary. And that's why, coming out of the war, this fear. So after the war, we're allied with the Soviet Union. We're all friends. We're going to come together and have a group hug. And pretty soon those begin to break down over various issues. But one issue we have to get here. Can you read this okay? After World War II. In fact, let's get the map done. Have I showed you guys this map last year? You want to see this? Want to see something scary? I hate that. My favorite tiles. Here we go. Want to get a paper cut? Put your hand over it. That'd be good when someone's walking by. What the heck are you doing? Okay, so after World War II, Europe is divided. Germany's divided in two. But what city is also divided in two? Berlin. And everything became focused around West Berlin. The US formed a major alliance. Here, the Soviets would counter with an alliance here. And Berlin, right in the middle, is divided east and west. When I was your age, it was West Berlin and East Berlin. What were these alliances called? Do you know? What's this alliance? Still here.
EU.
The U.S. is still part of it.
NATO?
Say it again.
NATO?
NATO. Yeah. The West had NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The United States is the leading member of NATO today. And it was to stop the Soviet Union. Now it's just there. This massive military alliance. The Soviets countered with one you don't need to know. It's called the Warsaw Pact. But when the United States built this alliance, okay, we'll stop them here. And we're going to make sure to tell the Soviets, you do anything here, we're going to stop you right here. We're going to tell everybody. We're telling the rest of Germany, West Germany, France, we will defend you like you're part of the borders of the United States. We said the same thing about Berlin. We will defend you like you're part of the United States. But what about Iran? What about Iraq? What about other countries around the world? In the 1950s, we started making other alliances. Other military alliances. Most famously, CETO! Any guesses what this means? It doesn't really make sense. Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. All you need to know about that, that's going to be our military alliance for Asia. And countries like Thailand will come into it, Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, Philippines, South Korea, Japan. So in the Vietnam War, one of the myths were that the United States, which is the U.S. was fighting. Who were our allies? Who else sent troops? Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, South Korea, Philippines, a few Taiwan, but that was still too close to China. Japan can't by their constitution. Other members of CETO were Britain, France, and Canada, and they said you guys are insane and didn't send anything. But other countries did. A military alliance. So we started surrounding them. And why do we feel we have to surround them? What's going on?
47.
Huh?
47.
Oh, we got lots of time. You like the orange pen? Yes or no? Raise your hand if you like the orange pen. Don't like the orange pen. Baffled by orange pen. The Truman Doctrine. That became the basis of American foreign policy for the next 40, Cold War 40 years, but it's still the basis of our foreign policy until, look at the non-watch. Anybody have a watch? What time is it?
It is
141.
141. 142.
Ooh. So to 142 today, the basis of American foreign policy. This is about President Truman in 1947. It is so shockingly important, it's hard to even comprehend. And this is not a law. He just gave a speech. And said, this is going to be the foreign policy of me to try to get reelected. And it turned out to be it just never ends. It says, we have to stop them with alliances because one communist is the same as any other communist anyplace else. They're all the same. Every communist is the same, and the enemy. And where are all communists directed from? The Soviet Union. They're getting the directions from Moscow. So we don't fight the communists everywhere. So it could be anywhere from Greece, Turkey, to Iran, to India, to Malaya. That's when it's still called Malaya. To Vietnam. We're letting this communist win. We're letting them win. And one more thing. If one country falls to communism, if Greece falls, what will its neighbors do? Moscow will be emboldened and they'll take others. What do we call that? Yeah. They called it the domino effect at first, but now we always call it the domino theory, same thing. One country will fall. So the idea was, Stalin will take Greece. The Truman Doctrine actually came from Greece and Turkey. And actually Stalin was not doing anything there, but the idea was Stalin, the head of the Soviet Union in 1947, would take Greece. He would be emboldened, and what's next? Italy. And when Italy falls, what's next? France, and then Britain, and then what? Wyoming. All the way, like a row of dominoes, right landing on Cheyenne. Because all roads lead to Wyoming. And communist hordes will be hitting the beaches of Wyoming at any moment, unless we stop them now. And so, now is that true? Is there any basis in reality to any of that? None. It's insane. Why is it insane? The reasons there was a revolution in Greece have nothing to do with all the many problems in Wyoming. Okay, why am I picking on Wyoming? We know. We know. I'm pointing at the camera. The problems in Greece have nothing to do with the problems in Italy or the problems in France. Every country has unique problems with different forms of government, different societies, different cultures, different economy, all a myriad of things. There's no reason to believe that if South Vietnam falls to the communists, communist hordes will be invading the shores of the United States. It makes no sense. But Truman wanted to look tough. And once he said this, if we don't stop them, Wyoming's next. Every politician down the road has got to do what?
Protect.
Huh? Yeah.
Protect Wyoming.
Fortify Wyoming. Even Truman. So in 1947, he did that to get aid for a really nasty military dictatorship in Greece. He got the aid. But what happens when the next time something like that happens? And Truman says, well, it's really not that serious. Did you lie to us? Are you letting the communists win? And so what must Truman do? And then what must the next president do? And the next president do? And the next president? And why this is so important is that once you have the Truman Doctrine, it affected American politics. Every political leader in the United States had to show they're tough on communism. Because just imagine if you said, you know, let's say, I'm throwing this out here as an example. A country we created after World War II called North Korea invaded South Korea. And let's say you're president, and you say, yeah, North Korea invaded South Korea, but most Americans couldn't find it on a map. North Korea is no threat to the United States. What would your opponent say?
You're not being tough.
The communists are going to win. You're, wait a second, what was the word I used? Remember the myth? You've stabbed us in the back. You might really be a traitor. So what does every politician do? More. Hey, on that happy note, oh, Gracie, you want me to tell you what you need to do?
Oh.
You gotta know your assignment. Oh gosh, I almost forgot. Did everyone pick up when I said online about the presentation?
Yeah.
Everybody look at the last page of that packet. Everyone's got the packet, right? And I'm going to collect the map tomorrow. I got busy. It's not that big of a deal for this. The last page. Find somebody to interview. Family members like that were involved in the Vietnam War. It's a really good project, and it's going to be pretty basic. And you have a couple weeks. Look at it. Please look at it tomorrow. I'll tell you more in class. Sound good?
Do we have a quiz on Monday?
I think so. I think I might have to do it on Tuesdays. I don't want to, but I mean, it's a pain.
Yeah.
But with 2/3 of the students gone every, you know.
Yeah, it's hard.
All right, what's our now? Algae do. You know that sheet I gave you, the map. The last page is on it. And then the first page and a half, which is very generic.
Okay.
And there'll be some notes. I tried my best to keep this very light. And there is some things, but it's not. I mean, AP I tried to keep light too, but there's a lot of stuff we got to do. My view is that this one's not like that.
Okay.
It's a fun class. Yeah.
I'm in Kalispell tomorrow. Cross country. Is it just a lecture?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll put on mine. What? How do running go? Do you have to run? How do you keep separate? Or do you just Or you don't?
We don't really. I mean, coaches yell at us all the time, but you can't really.
You know, if you're
Can't do it.
moving,
And you don't need to wear a mask while you run, so that'd be so bad.
if you're moving and you're outside,
Yeah. I mean,
it's 99% okay.
yeah.
I mean, all right. Yeah, that's what we're doing tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right.
We'll see. What time are you guys leaving?
Leaving like.
Oh,